Yes, it is a big topic. A couple of things that I want to say. First of all, it's a great pleasure to be here. As you can probably tell from my accent, I came over from the States as well. Not last night. Well, actually, I arrived last night, so I came over on the day flight yesterday, so at least I got some sleep. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with the 3 V's definition of big data. Is anybody familiar with that? There's a lot of definitions. Gartner would argue with Andy that there actually is a definition of big data. And the 3 V's was that big data was data that had volume, variety, and velocity that was basically too great for traditional databases to handle. I would say we have a bit of a velocity problem here today. I've been assured we will get your full break. I'm just going to make a few brief comments because I do want to say a few things while we've got you all here. And then my colleague Mark Krieger, who can put his hand up, he's doing a breakout here on Vertica after the break as well. So for those of you who are interested in drill down, I can skip the commercial part, but I do want to say a few things. So on the topic of a gold rush, our belief, and actually, Andy mentioned Amazon before, is that there's gold in data. I mean, what really makes Amazon Amazon? Are the books they sell any different than the books other stores sell? Are even the prices, I mean, they're known for having good prices, but is there that much difference between what you pay for an item on Amazon as opposed to what you pay for it elsewhere? No, what's really the difference with Amazon from other companies that they compete against, and they compete in many businesses these days, is how effectively they use data. And I talked about the definition of big data. If you go to Quora, or you can also go to Wikipedia, and you say, who created the term big data, you'll actually see there's probably 4 or 5 or 6 different answers to that question. There's no distinct, this is the person or this is the place. There's various papers where the term big data was first used. But what's really striking about it is the term was actually created in the 99 to 2001 timeframe. So in technical circles, the term big data it's a dozen years old. But yet, if you actually did, and it's the one slide I left out, I took a lot of slides out because I'm trying to keep my time limited here, but the one slide I took out was if you ever do a Google Trend search and you really look at searches for big data, you'll see that actually from like 2001, 9901, it's pretty flat for a long time. There really weren't a whole lot, and in the last 18 months, it's really exploded, and there has been a gold rush. Why is that? Well, the reason for that is that, there's an interest level that's going beyond technologies at this point in time. That's why probably a lot of you are here in the room. If we had more time, I'd try to get a sense of how many of you are an IT organization or more technically focused, as opposed to how many of you are business people or financial executives or operation executives trying to figure out what to do about this. And who's the Amazon in my industry, or can I be the Amazon in my industry? Maybe it hasn't happened yet, but it's in the process of happening. So, there was more data created in 2012 than the entire history of mankind prior to that. So the amounts of data that we're dealing with are absolutely exploding, and there's a big interest. And in some cases it's seen as a challenge, in some cases it's seen as an opportunity. It's really both. And how companies are choosing to address it in organizations, I know many of you are from the public sector as well, are choosing to address it is a very, very key strategic challenge. So the way we see it at HP Vertica, and Vertica is a company that was actually founded in 2005 and acquired by HP in 2011, on the fundamental belief that existing database technology, existing data warehouse technology, Alan talked about data warehouses, they're not going away, no, but they're changing, was going to dramatically change because of this. So, and again, this is probably a slide that I'd be happy to talk with any of you about the break, but it just talks about all of the information sources. And again, I think Andy did a good job of covering them before, and they are different. I would agree fully with what he said, that they are very different, and there's different ways you want to treat them. And, as much as I'd like to tell you we're the one-size-fits-all, big data solution, and we can handle a lot of stuff inside of Vertica, and obviously in the broader HP, we have a lot of different technology, between autonomy and hardware and software and services. But, what's really interesting is the really interesting insights, and I don't know if you'd agree with this, but I hope you would, I hope you both would, don't necessarily come from analyzing social media data or operational data or mobile data or images or video. It's where these things start to meet. We often, and that's really what big data is really about. So it's not looking at this data or that data or that data, it's looking at them all together and sort of figuring out the intersection. And so you might be dealing with them in different places, you might use different technologies to store and manage and catalog, but at the same time it's the intersection of how that all comes together, which is really, really interesting solutions can be found. So, this is, of course, the obligatory Gartner slide which talks about, and I think there's some IDC numbers in here as well. But, the net is this is driving a lot of IT spending right now. And again, it's been a topic that is not new to IT. Most IT executives know that big data is an issue we've been dealing with for a long period of time. But I think somebody mentioned before, I think it was the first speaker whose name I'm not recalling, was talking about how he hasn't seen a company that's actually doing what they feel is a good job. Well, we went out and surveyed as HP, and there's some, again, third-party IDC and Gartner numbers in here as well. If you look, 86% is a pretty high number today, say we can't get the right information at the right time to support the right outcomes. And so that's really what the big data problem, challenge, opportunity is really all about, and that's what's creating this gold rush in the market. So, and the topic of sensor data was brought up, and again, I mentioned 2012, all of the data being created, how this continues to just explode in 2013. Just to give you a brief example of what this means. Okay, let's think about an airline. Okay, so first of all, airlines care about social media. They care about, my flight fortunately yesterday wasn't delayed, but they care about consumers tweeting in the airport that my flight's delayed and I'm really upset at XX airline. But a jet engine, we commonly cite this comes from a McKinsey report, creates, the sensors on a jet engine create 2 terabytes an hour of data. Now, ideally, most of that data is going to be pretty boring and dull. And it's just going to tell you everything's fine, all systems are go, right? But at the same time, this is data, you don't want to necessarily throw it away. Because if you see any blips, if you see any trends, if you see any anomalies, you want to be able to act on that. You also want to be able to build predictive maintenance models so that the engines don't have problems, so that there's not flight delays that cause the upset consumers. So again, I talked about the intersections. And of course, airlines have big investments in reservation systems and CRM systems. So it's taking this operational data, the sensor data, the social data, the CRM data, and kind of figuring out how to use it together. And we might store it differently, we might catalog it differently, we might use different systems. And there's an absolute explosion in this Internet of Things and the amount of data being created by sensors and being created by machines, machine-to-machine data. Think about it, it doesn't matter. I mean, we talk about people tweeting on their cell phones. Well, the cell phone is actually creating much more data going back to the network provider, so the network provider can manage the network. So, it doesn't matter what you look at. It's a combination of all of these things, and it's growing massively. Again, another slide which we can probably deal with, and I think Mark will probably deal with it a little bit in the breakout, but I talked about the 3 V's, velocity, volume, variety, talked about all of the sources, and talked about being able to use and combine. What I really sort of wanted to talk about, and again, I just want to keep an eye on time because I don't want to cut too much into your break, is the idea that, so the systems we have been using aren't necessarily able to handle it anymore. And this is where commonly we're coming in and engaging. I know Alan talked a bit about the 3.5-week query that was now down to 3.5 days, right, or 3.5 hours. What this is really about, and this is sort of the big point I want to make, is giving these business, financial, operational, I would say executives, but it's really across the organization, the ability to converse with the data. You can't have a conversation with your data. This is what is really needed, and this is why visualization technology is so powerful as well, because it makes this understandable and actionable to people who aren't technical and technologists in nature, but lets them do it at a pace that's not about having them sit down with a BI analyst and create a report format that will run on Sunday, deliver on Monday, and every week watch and rinse and repeat, and then maybe once a quarter we'll sit down and redefine the format to adapt. This is about letting people kind of have at it and drill down and look at correlations and look at it visually and really converse. And if you're having 3.5-week queries, I would say even 3.5-hour queries or even 3.5-minute queries, that conversation is very, very difficult. So the technology needs to be able to support much, much, much faster time to response. Also better interfaces, like we talked about visual interfaces, and it's really basically being able to take all of this data, all of this variety, the structured, unstructured, and bring it in effectively real time. That's the only way you can really solve these problems and have these conversations and make these decisions and drive this value that I won't walk through the whole derivation of this equation, but basically the data value as opposed to just the delivery cost of managing it. IT organizations, because generally speaking they're measured on a cost basis, tend to focus on the denominator of this equation. Business people are focusing on the numerator, and making this successful is really focusing on both. So we'll talk more about the Vertica platform in the breakout. I'm going to skip that right now because I know everybody wants to get coffee, and I don't want to give this short shrift, obviously. We're glad to be sponsoring this event, delighted to be here. We're happy to talk to you at the booth, happy to talk to you in the breakout. as I mentioned, Vertica is a company that was founded in 2005. Michael Stonebreaker, who's probably one of the best, if not the best known database visionaries, realized that this era was coming upon us and the traditional database technology was not going to be able to handle big data. That's what Vertica was founded for. And as events have occurred, has proven to be right as data continues to explode. So we've got a variety of customers across a variety of industries doing a variety of different things on top of our platform. Again, we can talk more about that. I don't want to spend too much time on this. One of the biggest things, and for those of you who are interested, and I know those of you in the public sector might be particularly interested, we ran a webinar back in January, and I know that Mark's going to talk about this a bit more. One of our most recent big wins was the Obama campaign. It was actually the Democratic National Committee used Vertica as the data mining platform. And for those of you who have any familiarity or have read any of the pieces about kind of how it was done, I mean, volunteers walking door to door and interacting with their friends and undecided voters, whether it was on social networks like Facebook or walking down door to door or seeing them at the local school, knew not just kind of who was in what column, but what issues to talk to them about. And it was based on all kinds of data. And we're actually not allowed to share those slides, but the replay of this webinar, if you want to listen to this, it's fascinating. What's also fascinating is how different the work that was done by the Obama campaign in 2012 built on what was done in 2008, which built on what was done by Howard Dean back in 2004, but how quickly the strategies evolved and how much they changed over those 12 years as well, or I guess in that case 8 years, 3 elections time frame. So there's a tremendous amount of value to be gained here, but it's also changing very, very fast. So anyway, I'll let you, it's available on the Vertica.com website for those of you who are interested in taking a listen. I highly recommend it. And again, it's really about bridging the gap, providing the business insight between the IT, it lets the CIO and the IT organization play a much more strategic role in delivering value to the business organization. And of course, HP is all about providing the platform and the services to build that on as well. So with that having said, we can talk more and you can come by our booth and learn how to evaluate Vertica. We actually give the product away up to 1 terabyte of data, which is pretty big, free, as long as you want it. You can actually download it. I think we even have some versions at the booth, or you can download it yourself, and we'll tell you more about it in the breakout. So with that having been said, I'll put my contact details up there. I know we're behind schedule. Do you want to take a question or two? Or do we